Patchwork, I created the sequence with the dialogue between the past and the present in mind. The turning of the pages mimics the passage of time, and the book opens with a photograph of me as a child sleeping at the kitchen table. When the page turns, my child self wakes to be a young woman, who I am now, and the paint on the walls around her is peeling, but she is at home. The next photo in comparison to the present version of myself is my mother, exhausted directly after she gave birth to me. The next photo is her present self, shown to be still exhausted, however not from childbearing, but from the ever-present labor of being a wife, and this idea is continued in the next photo here. I then was imagining my mother in a certain setting, and I had imagined her in a house from the past, which is this photo. I then compared that to a house in the current times that had reminded me of a house we had lived in before, and this one had an uncanny resemblance to a past house. In that house lived these animals, and they now exist as photographs that have been abandoned in our current basement. These animals show themselves today as different animals that hold a strange resemblance to the old ones, as if they had somehow traveled through time. The image of the idea of pets connects here with the image of the family together. Here, my parents and my brother aren't found in this intimate setting very often, so I had photographed them, and since I was not in the photograph, I see the mannequin sort of as a placeholder for myself. In that respect of my brother dressing the mannequin here, my father dresses my brother from the past, and these photos show their bond. I then decided to contrast those past photos to a present portrait of my father, where he appears colder, less nurturing, as his facial hair has also grayed. In the past, I show my mother's portrait from her wedding day. Here she watches my father, who is in the future, to her. And the sequence of these images allude to how the past expectations and promises like marriage follow us through life. These expectations never change, although we do. I then decided to pair that image with the one of my severed hair, and here I am reminded of the sacrifice of the mother and the marriage, and the sacrifice of her beauty and the duties that she has made in her new role. Among that motif of red and sacrifice is carried into this forced family photo, where my brother and I are posed with our maternal grandfather, whose name we did not know at the time or had never remembered. And I pair that with this photo of his now abandoned house and the present, and this reveals his true relationship to our family that had been hidden in the past photo with the fake smiles. On the other side of the page, my grandmother and brother glare back at the past and the generational traumas that had been left for us. And in the next photo, my grandmother is compared to her previous present self, in this portrait of her in the past. She appears unchanged, as though she's stuck in time. And today, on the street where she had raised my mother and my mother had raised my brother and I for a short time after we were born, the houses are now withering away and the garbage has nowhere to go. It's shoved in these small shacks. Here, I decided to compare my brother in the past with his current self and showing that physical change. Alongside that, this image reads in the small photograph, "Now for my alibi," reminding me of excuses for the peeling walls that have surrounded us for decades. And these photos are sequenced through color as well. My brother on the other side of the page is a child, and he doesn't mind his appearance with the silly banana sticker on his face. And next to him is a photograph of the past in a familiar road that is shown again here. And this is, again, it's the street where my maternal side is from, and it has now dilapidated and is visually grayed. My mother stands in front of her childhood house in the field. it's overtaken now by brambles, and another family has inhabited it. Her expression is a bit tiresome. She is still haunted by past memories of her childhood. And on the other side of the page is my father sort of coming towards her from the past to rescue her from that emotional trauma. And together I decided to pair this candid moment that shows their relationship today as they have stayed together in marriage decades later. And alongside that is a past photo of my father before they had been married in the place where he's from in Nova Scotia, which is known for the Shark Scramble in Yarmouth, which is pictured there next to him. And then it is my brother wearing his graduation ring that was then lost sort of in that same place in the ocean. I had found this photograph of my brother and I taped onto my father's workshop after he had left to work. And him being a very traditionally masculine father, this had sort of surprised me and touched me deeply, because the older that I get, the more I see the quiet ways that my father shows his love and devotion to our family. And that is also shown here with this sort of parental devotion regarding masculine tradition, and my father removing his facial hair in order to properly wear a mask during the pandemic on his flight to his workplace. Below him would be the sink as he shaves, and our washroom had been neglected mid-renovation for a long time, and it looked like an abandoned house because the house was 100 years old, and it was strange to clean yourself in such a dirty space. And I sequenced that with a self-portrait, as the washroom is a place where I'd spent a lot of time as a teenage girl worrying about my appearance. And I thought of that. This photo is of the ceiling of the bathroom peeling the paint, and the aging house reminds me of my aging skin as a woman and what that means for my value in society, and also of my aging family as a daughter. The previous image is paired with this contemporary photograph of a home that we had lived in the past. The wall inside had once exploded with ants, and I wondered if there were scars inside too. In the house, I imagined us, and so here I decided to put my mother, brother, and I in this photo from the past. I then paired that photo with my mother in the present day. Here, much like the previous photo, the cupboards behind her are coverless, as we had always seemed to live in these half-made houses, either on their way towards dilapidation or renovation. Here, her expression reminds me of the ambiguous emotion between grief and love as she reminisces while looking out the window. And I paired that with this image as it was sort of what I imagined what was in her head, imagining her son sort of running into the distance from the past. From the past to the present, our yards house the junk that we removed from the house. It's almost a sort of a staple for rural Nova Scotian houses to have some kind of visible junkyard somewhere on the property. This is our one family portrait together from the past, and ironically here my parents appear at the age that they are now. Along the bottom of the picture are worry dolls, which when I was a child I had pretended that each one was a member of my family. And I paired these images with the contemporary house that we live in mid-renovation with the peeling paint. And inside the house I had imagined us from the past, and so I included this photograph of my brother with my father in the background. You can see his tattoo is also visible now. And in this photograph, my father is shown he had finally finished shaving his facial hair. He looks like a completely different person, but yet he also resembles his past self. And in this photo, I think a lot about his sacrifices as a father, and staying loyal to those promises of serving the family, and sort of how he's carried that through his life and living in that same skin, and how that tattoo sort of symbolizes that in a way. And when he is away, the dog would wait weeks for his return, and this made me wonder how the dog would experience time, and also made me think of how I experience time, which in this image beyond the window, the white nothingness is how I would experience that thought of time. And when my father returned, he was kept behind plastic sheets as we are still in the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is sort of like the visual representation of how that devotion and sacrifice continues. And lastly, I decided to add this photograph that I think appears to look timeless and ambiguous. This photo could have been taken today, but was actually taken decades ago.